Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Commonwealth Club of California. I'm Denise Michaud, Chair of the Grown-Ups Forum, and our program is called I Hear You, talking and listening to people with Alzheimer's. We have two distinguished guests with us today, Allison Kuhn and Dr. Jane Mahakian. Dr. Jane is a gerontologist who has specialized over 30 years for managing care for people with forgetfulness, memory issues, and primarily Alzheimer's. People from all over the country seek out her guidance and her help. In 2017, she founded the Alzheimer's Care Armenia, which is a nonprofit dedicated to developing programs and care for Alzheimer's patients in Armenia. So it's truly a global issue. Allison Kuhn is a well-established freelance writer, editor, and speaker. She works closely with designers, publishers, and has many corporate clients. She served as senior editor for Heart to Heart Global Cardiac Care and works with the Koret Foundation here in San Francisco on stories profiling the accomplishments of their grantees. On a special note, she has contributed text to two exhibitions at the Smithsonian National Postal Museum. So welcome, Dr. Jane and Allison.
Thank you so much, Denise.
I want to remind everybody, by the way, that we want to entertain your questions and want to hear your comments, so please put your thoughts in the YouTube chat room. I want to first tell you that both of my grandmothers had dementia. One had needed care for 10 years and one needed care for 6 years. And unfortunately, this is not an unusual situation. The thing is that when somebody has dementia, it does not just affect the person with dementia, it affects the entire family. And when I read this book, I thought this should be required reading for any family member who is going through this kind of situation. So can you tell me or tell us how or what brought you guys together, and why did you decide to collaborate on this book?
So I had the great good luck to be introduced to Dr. Jane by my mom's primary care physician. I had called him up to say that I was increasingly uncomfortable leaving my mother alone in the house. And I was trying to figure out what to do. And he said to me, Allison, do you have someone to talk to? And I said, I'm talking to you. And he said, no, I'm not your person. He suggested Dr. Jane. I got in touch. And truly, from the first conversation, it was as if this gigantic weight had slid off me. That said, moving my mother from her home to a memory care community was a big undertaking. I truly thought that my mother would wind up hating me for depriving her of the retirement that she had envisioned in her own home. Happily, that didn't happen, and I credit Dr. Jane and my unexpected aptitude for being comfortable telling what we refer to as the kind of lie. And the basis for our writing this book was my impassioned, lengthy emails and phone calls to Dr. Jane over a period of a couple of years, because even though my mom was in a great place, there are inevitably dramas and challenges. And Dr. Jane was there for me truly every single step.
Well, Allison, I have to say that, your emails really formed a lot of the basis of our book, right? The vignettes and the collaboration. It just seemed like a natural fit.
It was a great fit, although as Dr. Jane and I started working, I realized that even though my mother would never be aware of our book, I couldn't do it while she was alive. And so my mother passed away in 2012. And a couple of years later, Dr. Jane and I started working.
Mm-hmm.
So the title of your book is so simple, 3 simple words, I hear you, but it is really a powerful message. How did you come up with that title?
You know, Denise, you're absolutely right. You know, I hear you is a very powerful, powerful message. You know, it's really all about, you know, the person really doesn't feel heard.
Mm.
The person that has a dementia, a forgetfulness, an Alzheimer's type dementia, or other type of dementias doesn't feel heard. Mm-hmm. And really what we saw out there is really many times, you know, there's no sense of how to connect with a person. And really the importance of being able to feel heard. So I hear you it just came. You know, it's just kind of almost like an epiphany how this occurred. But really it's a book that's full of practical points. And it's a book that really provides a sense of security for that person that is caring for someone with a memory impairment. And it's really all about, you know, being able to have that person feel that they're heard. So it's not, that person's not defined by the disease. That person's self is there. And we're, you know, the book is really a guide to teach people really how do you reach that person.
Allison, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, of course, there's 2 sides to communicating. There's talking and there's listening.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a temptation to talk around somebody with dementia. But in fact, the person still has feelings. And even if the person is less verbal than he or she used to be, that doesn't mean that their feelings are less acute. And I would say, on the contrary, perhaps they're more acute, just the way there's that theory that people who are blind develop heightened sensitivity in other senses. I have this sense that could also be true for dementia. My mother was a keen observer, a keen listener, even on days when she didn't feel like talking.
You know, I want to tell you that when I read this book, I was thinking of my interactions with my grandmothers, which was many, many years ago. And but then I also thought, you were also listening to me, or you were hearing me as a caregiver. So I kind of saw that as both, you know, of how to talk and listen to the person with dementia, but you were also acknowledging me as a caregiver, you know, who has all these feelings too. So, and I want to tell you, I appreciate that so much.
Absolutely. You know, I think that the logistics of caring for someone with dementia are complex.
Mm-hmm.
And there is an understandable tendency to let communication slide because you have to focus on so many other things. And so I think that for caregivers, it can be so isolating, even if you aren't the primary caregiver. And hopefully the book will help people, because we make the point more than once, more than twice, that doing this alone is not in your best interest or the interest of someone with dementia. It really does take a team of sorts.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it is a journey that you really can't do alone. And so that person needs to have a team. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so important to gather as much information as you can and do your research and really reach out to people for support, because it's something, whether it's a support group or other types of groups and support systems, that you need to reach out to. It's something you really can't do alone by yourself.
And there's a lot of books out there on Alzheimer's, on dementia, and many are huge books or textbooks on things that happen in aging and all that. So what what sets your book apart? What makes your book different than these other books that are out there? So many books.
May I go first?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. When we started this book, I won't say we bounced around, but we wondered how broad we could go. And we decided to just focus on communicating, which deserves to be a topic on its own. I'm holding the book up just so you can see. It's not a huge book, okay? It's a small book because it focuses just on this main aspect of caring for somebody with dementia. There are lots of books out there. There are personal accounts, there are caregiver support guides, and there are academic books. Most of them give what I'm going to call scant attention to the idea of communicating, which is, it's so central to taking care of somebody. And it's actually possible by communicating to make someone with dementia feel that he or she has nothing wrong with him or herself, and that they can still have a rich life. And so if you get sidetracked by all the other things, really for the person with dementia, it doesn't much matter what's going on in his or her brain. What matters is what's going on in his or her heart. And you can shape that.
I think it's also important too, this book really instills a lot of hope for people, and not only hope and skill set that you are communicating correctly with that person that has a memory impairment, but also hope for that person. Mm-hmm. and that truly that they can lead productive lives, they can lead a purposeful life. And it's all about creating that in which is discussed in the book. I think many times people feel that a person with a cognitive impairment is not going to be productive. They're not a productive member of society. And actually, that is absolutely not true. So it's all about looking at what that person can do, not so much what they can't do, and really focusing on those things. Mm-hmm. So, what in looking at other types of literature and books available, there really was very little that really provides a guide for people to how to communicate.
Mm-hmm. So in your book, you have 11 vignettes, which are such little stories that are so relatable. And can you give us a couple of examples of those vignettes that may be your favorite?
I'd love to. I'll talk a little bit about Mary and her blankety blank parents. Mary was a 82, 83-year-old woman living in a memory care community. And as many of you know, when a person has moderate stage Alzheimer's disease, for example, that person may start what we call sundowning. Mm. So every day around 4:30, she would start knocking on the doors of the memory care unit. And the staff really had no idea what to do. How do you really, diffuse and really redirect some of that agitation? She believed that her parents were coming to pick her up. So the staff decided that what they're going to do is they're going to have one of the nurses telephoned Mary and said that she had a phone call and that her parents were calling her. Mary still believed that her parents were alive. Mm. The nurse on the other end of the phone spoke to Mary and basically said, your parents are here. This is the Sheraton Hotel calling. And your parents are running late and they'll be there tomorrow to pick you up. So Mary was her delusion, her distorted thought that her parents were alive was what we call validated. So instead of saying that your parents have passed away, her parents, she believed and received the comfort that her parents were still here. Mm-hmm. And then they engaged her and distracted her with a job to do, such as setting the table for herself and other residents. So it worked very, very nicely. It is something that therapeutic fibbing in the book, what it's really called is the kind of lie. So that person and that professional working in memory care communities have to be comfortable with kind of stretching the truth. Of course, depending upon where that person is in his or her progression of the disease. But it worked really nicely for Mary, and it serves as a way to make her feel like there's nothing wrong with her. So it is truly, one of my favorite vignettes. I also kind of want to just add this story. Several decades ago, probably 3 decades ago, I took my dear grandmother to Las Vegas. And this was maybe 30 some odd years ago. And my grandmother had forgetfulness. And when we got to Las Vegas, she immediately hit the slot machines. And she started dropping her money in, and nothing happened, of course. And she had a wonderful time, and it was time to eat. And so after lunch, she said, honey, I want to go and play that same machine. Maybe I'll be lucky. So we went out to the casino after lunch and went to find this machine. And we were walking around for the longest time. And she came upon a machine that she thought was her machine. And actually, it was not the machine she had played. So I said, this is not your machine, Grandma. This is not, it's over there. It's 2 aisles over. And she said, no, honey, it's not. So she began to play again and dropping dollar after dollar. And I'm like, oh, I know this is not the machine. And then all of a sudden she won. And the bells went off and it rang, it was wonderful. And at that time, the money would drop down, how it used to be in Las Vegas with the machines. And she won $2,500.
Wow.
So she turns to me, and this was kind of a pivotal moment in my career. This was a very long time ago. And turns to me and says, honey, I know you're studying to work with older people that have memory loss, but I just want you to know something. I said, well, what is it, Grandma? And she said, I want you to know that people with memory loss are always right.
Mm.
So that became, the premise really of my work and the philosophy and more of the focus of how I created my own company here in California to really make that person feel like there's nothing wrong with them. So I give most of the credit to my grandmother.
I was going to ask you, and I find this too, or I see this, do you think caregivers, so they're used to dealing with someone in a certain way, so do you find that they feel like they need to correct that person so much and they need to be right? Mm-hmm. A caregiver with a family member?
I really think it's, many times we all struggle when we have a loved one that has a cognitive impairment, is that we want to remember, we're that person is there, but that person, that the needs have changed, and that person's, what they want to remember, especially for professional caregivers, is they know your parent as they are right now. So your job is to bring their past forward. And by by keeping the focus on the past, of course, positive memories, that really helps that person stay more focused and more centered. It can reduce agitation very, very, just amazingly, bringing the past forward. It could be things such as stories. It could be photos. Those type of memories will help reduce anxiety and agitation. And I think, everybody is different, and the disease affects everybody differently too.
I think that even just saying, oh, you're right, that's enormously empowering to somebody. I mean, even someone with memory loss who doesn't remember that you have corrected him or her 5 times in the last 5 minutes, they do get a great feeling from, oh, you're right. And then you're going to move right on. That person's not keeping score. But to keep contradicting someone, particularly if the person with dementia is telling you something that he or she believes is true, then for you to say, oh, no, actually, that's not true. That's disconcerting. That is not comforting. The objective, I think, ultimately is to make someone feel good. And I think so many of us are invested in being right, that there's a tendency to contradict, to try and bring the person with dementia back to our sense of reality. But you have no choice except to go where that person is.
Well, absolutely. It's really stepping into their shoes, right? So you have to meet them where they are at, not where you are at. And moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day, that can change. So your loved one may be back in high school, or they may be back dating. They may be at an earlier age. You have to figure out where they are in time. But you have to really step into their reality and not expect them to step into yours. When we argue, you will lose. Guaranteed. So going against what they're, as long as they're staying safe, as long as they're safe, and it's okay to allow them to win and to make them feel as though there's nothing wrong with them and that they are correct. So somebody may say, I didn't have breakfast this morning, and when actually they did. So you serve them breakfast again, because that's the right thing to do. Now, of course, if they have a piece of cake and they want to have another piece of cake and another piece of cake, you got to use your, the common sense, right? So that's where you would use a distraction with having that person perhaps help you and instill a sense that they are helping you solve something or do some sort of task to make them feel useful and purpose-driven is really what you want to do.
And the memory loss can actually make this easier for you to pull off, because if you get a no at 2:00, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a no at 2:05. You can just approach it from a different angle. And one of my favorite vignettes is about my mom's 80th birthday party, to which she had enthusiastically agreed when my sister and I proposed it. And then when the day came and I arrived to pick my mom up, there she was, looking lovely in an armchair, having completely forgotten about the party. So I reminded her, and she looked right at me and said, "Oh, I don't really feel like it. I'd rather just stay here." Well, our entire extended family will be gathering at a restaurant to honor my mother, and she would rather just stay there. So I don't say, "Oh, no." I say, "Oh, okay. I think I'll go next door and see Jack for a minute." Jack was her next door neighbor. We had invited him to the party. He had forgotten about the party and said he didn't really feel like it either. So I thought, great, here we have the emperor's new birthday party. Nobody there. Anyway, I say, "Oh, okay, Caroline will be sorry that you've missed it. How about if we bring you some of the fabulous dessert cookies?" He says that would be great. So I go back next door. I have been gone a maximum of 5 minutes. And I say, "Jack is feeling a little tired this afternoon. He's not going to come with us to the party, but I told him that we would bring him cookies. It's really lovely out right now, but it will be chilly by the time we leave the restaurant. Would you like to bring your corduroy coat for later?" She says she thinks that would be a great idea. She gets up, she freshens her lipstick, and off we go. So again, I didn't contradict her. I didn't criticize her. I just tried jiggling the party switch from a different angle. So now we're on the way to the party. She's happy as a clam. We get there, and the big triumph of that afternoon was that after her brother had talked about her life and her accomplishments, after my sister had made a lovely tribute and toast, my mother whispers to me, "I'd like to speak now." And I thought, okay, she's an accomplished former debater. If she wants to speak, she'll speak. So I asked if she would be comfortable standing up to make it easier for everybody to hear her. She said, of course. She stood up. She spoke completely fluidly and graciously for several minutes, thanking everyone for coming, talking about the importance of family, how happy it made her to see the children of her generation of cousins, and so on. It was truly lovely. And when she was done, she just sat down. Everybody applauded. My sister and I tried not to cry. And I thought, we have given her the best birthday possible. She has basked in the limelight, in the love of people who have known her their entire lives. And she rose to the occasion, shining so brightly herself.
Beautiful. You mentioned 10 ways to empower someone with dementia. Can you give us and you said that somebody actually said
Yes.
these are good for people who don't have dementia.
That's correct. So we have a chapter. It's the chapter after the vignette, Mary and her blankety blank parents is in. That chapter. The Mary chapter is called Decoding the Languages of Dementia. The next chapter is called Empowering the Person Within. And we have a list in there of 10 truly doable. They aren't mystery techniques. 10 really easy ways to empower someone, to make somebody feel good and heard. And I got a text one morning at 7:06 from a friend of mine who was reading the book. And I'd like to just read that to you. It's just 3 sentences. I'm on page 90. I must say, if I ever need this information, this book will have empowered me. Your list of 10 things to empower Robin is a good list for many people, not just ones with a brain disease. And that's particularly thrilling to me. She's not the only reader who has made that comment, that the book isn't just about how to communicate with someone with dementia. A friend actually said to me the other day, this book is helping me understand how to treat people. And she meant people in general. So even though our focus is people with dementia, there's a lot to be said for kindness and compassion.
Dr. Jane, can you give us a couple of examples of those 10 ways to empower ourselves?
Absolutely. It's really all about, helping that person find a purpose, right? And keeping that sense of the self alive. So for an example, in a leading memory care community here, it's a national community for people with memory impairments. One of the things that they really really make sure and instill is that resident, that person has a job. And that giving that person a job gives them that sense of purpose. Many times people may have behaviors that look as though they could be agitated, right? These behaviors can display in such a way that they may be disruptive, either at home or in a community setting. So it's trying to figure out what is the message behind those behaviors, right? What is happening there? What's the need? And once that need is identified, giving that person a job usually works to fulfill that need. And I'll give you an example, Denise, is a very dear patient of mine recently moved to the memory care community that I'm referring to, and he was moving chairs around in the community, and obviously quite potentially disruptive, right? Unless he's in a room by himself moving chairs, and it occurred to all of us: why is he doing this? What is this about? Is that he needs a sense that he has a job to do. So the staff at that community gave him a job to do every day, where he works alongside with the maintenance person and helps that person move items. And that fulfills that need. So once consistently done on a daily basis, that need is fulfilled. Those other behaviors that are more disruptive have definitely lessened and even will be going away. But that's a really good example. It's really, having that person feel, it's a universal need to feel understood, whether you have a brain disease or not. And it's figuring out ways to, empower that person who's living at home with you, or maybe living in their own home with caregivers, and making them feel that they're also giving back and that they're productive. So another good example is, a patient of mine folds laundry every day. Now you can say, how much laundry can a couple have, right? Every day the laundry's done. So what the husband does is he gathers items, the towels and sheets and things out of the linen closet every day, and puts them in the basket. And every day she folds towels and linens and washcloths and all kinds of things like that. That makes her feel productive. Now, he doesn't do the laundry every day, right? That would be a waste of resources. But she is folding clothes. She is folding towels. And that makes her feel really good about that. Empowering that person also means, having a schedule. In the best memory care communities, they have a schedule. They have a consistent, structured schedule. At home, you can also develop a schedule. And that provides really a sense of safety for that person, and also makes them feel like they're up to something every day. And again, that empowers that person.
Mm-hmm. Allison, you write a bit about your mother in the book.
Yes.
How did it, and you said you didn't want to write until after she passed away, but how did you feel about writing about her?
So partly because I had Dr. Jane as my tutor, but also because my siblings and I had advantages that made it much easier to take care of my mother than it might have been. She had the resources to live in a memory care community, which she did for almost a decade. And I believe that she lived so long because she had no external stress in her life. Once we moved her from her home, it was as if the responsibilities that had become too much for her had just vanished. She never asked again. I think that her energy and her optimism increased on day 2 in the memory care community, because as Jane just said, she had something to look forward to. She had a reason to get up in the morning, put on her outfit, and sail down the hall to the dining room. And at home, she had become a person who spent most of her morning napping, reading, watching TV, dozing, reading, repeating, etc. And so for her, it was a great move. If my family hadn't had the advantages that we had, it's possible that I wouldn't have written the book with Jane, because I would have just wanted to forget myself what had happened. But I think it was mostly a lovely time for my mother. As I said earlier, she did not wind up hating me. We shared many, many moments of candor and joy and hilarity together during the years that she lived in the memory care community. And the idea that by writing this book, Jane and I could help a huge number of people who are trying to take care of people with dementia. But by extension, that means that we are helping the people with dementia, because the more of us, the non-dementia people, if you will, who want to interact with people with dementia, then the less socially disappeared those people will be.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. So most of the vignettes, which are, again, so interesting and engaging, at the end of most of them, you have some practical points. And how did you come up with those? It really put it into such a, again, practical way of how to, engage with someone with dementia. How did you come up with all those?
It's really the practical points really are just serve as reminders for all of us. They really are the salient points in that respective chapter. And they're things that you can look back on, a quick read. You can jump. What's really great about this book is you can jump around from chapter to chapter. You don't have to go in order. You can start with chapter 4 and then go to chapter 3, for example. It doesn't have to be in order. But those points, those practical points, really are really important, and we wanted to bring out the importance of each chapter in those points.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And you've mentioned the word empowerment
A lot.
a lot today, a lot in the book. Empowering on both sides, right? The caregiver and the person who has dementia. Talk with us about that.
Empowerment really it's an ongoing approach. It's empowerment of you, the carer, as well as empowerment of that person with a cognitive impairment.
Mm-hmm.
It makes them feel useful. It makes them feel they're right, and it really decreases a lot of any potential behavioral and mood changes.
Mm-hmm.
As the disease progresses, we see, unfortunately, I see behavioral changes, or the person may become more depressed, or they may become more agitated or aggressive, and even strike out. So empowering that person makes them feel as though there's really, as we had said earlier, there's really nothing wrong with them. And if you can make them feel that way, then it really changes. It's a real game changer to the treatment. No one is signing up, for example, to move into memory care communities. People don't want to move from their home. They want consistency. They don't want to change. But for example, once that person does make that change, their sense and their ideas of what home was does change, because they're on a structured, consistent and engaging type schedule. You can also do that at home too. Not everybody can afford, a memory care community. You can do that at home with again, going back to that very simple schedule that a carer can create. And that schedule really serves as a way to provide that safety for that person, that sense of security. It is amazing to see the changes when a person is on a schedule.
Do we have time for me to tell a super quick story about my mother?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. So this took place when my mother was still living in her own home, and I was living there with her. And one morning she hadn't gotten up for breakfast. And now it's getting towards lunch, and I'm getting a little antsy because she's going to be dehydrated. She's going to have low blood sugar. She's going to be stiff. So I go in the kitchen. I make 2 very beautiful, if I say so myself, salads. And I stick my head in her bedroom and I say, "Hi, it's almost lunchtime. Are you hungry?" And she looks right at me and says, "Not really." And I think, okay. So I said, "Well, I am hungry, and I've made us gorgeous salads, but I didn't put the dressing on. So we can just put saran wrap on yours and put it in the fridge for later. But I'd like to eat now. Would you come and keep me company in the dining room? And she says, oh, darling, I'd be delighted to. So she gets up, she does her little toilette, she puts on a lovely robe, she comes down the hall into the kitchen, she sees the salads, says how beautiful they are, and then immediately says, do we have water glasses on the table? And I say, not yet. And she goes, okay, I'll get them. So she's completely forgotten about the not hungry stance. I have empowered her, if you will, to do something for me. She's going to keep me company. She's going to get us water. We have a totally lovely lunch. And after lunch, she says, thank you. It was so delicious. If you need to get back to work, why don't I do the dishes? So here we are. I didn't boss her and say she had to get up. I didn't offer to bring her lunch in bed. She got up and we had a lovely time because I found a way to empower her and to let her know that she's important to me. I wanted to spend time with her. Done.
How do you, maybe Dr. Jane, how do you handle people who are feeling guilty about possibly moving, their parent or their spouse even from their home to a memory care unit?
Absolutely. That's very common, Denise. It's very common. And why do we feel so guilty? Is because we love them so much, right? And I think many of us have made promises to not move that person. But I think it's really kind of letting go of the steering wheel and that you really can't do it alone. That even with a caregiver at home, it becomes very difficult because there really are no activities at home, right? There's not an activity director in your home. So it's really getting beyond the guilt and understanding that this person needs treatment. And the treatment for somebody with a brain disease like Alzheimer's disease is a structured environment. Now, not everybody, as you know, can afford a structured environment. They must keep that person at home because of the financial piece usually is what drives those decisions, right? Or in their own home. So that's why, building in structure at home will help. But that guilt is really the guilt is a feeling, but you have to get beyond that and see that this person really needs the treatment, and that treatment is a key to keeping that person, slowing down the progression of the disease through activities, through music, through art, through exercise, through great nutrition, and most importantly, is through socialization. So when people are socializing, something magical happens, right? And so even the person, many times patients, the families come to me and say, well, my mom would never attend an activity, only to be pleasantly surprised that when they come to visit, they don't even want to leave the community because they're so busy and they're enjoying themselves. And bottom line is they're having fun in the moment. And so it doesn't really matter if they can't remember what they did yesterday or what they had for breakfast. What matters is that they're having fun and that they're becoming more alive in that moment. That's truly what it's about.
And I think it would be probably exhausting for the caregiver, the family member, to create these moments all the time.
It is exhausting, and you have to have those resources. It is very difficult, and that's why many carers become, they exhausted. It is exhausting, or they become depressed, or they become, anxious. They have sleep problems because they're worried about their loved one, whether it's a spouse or whether it's, a parent. And especially now during, we're still in our COVID times, it becomes very difficult, much more difficult.
there is still, after all these years, a stigma about people with dementia and Alzheimer's, and people, forget that it's a real disease. How do you address that kind of thing? And when do you think the tipping point is going to be?
Denise, that's really, it's hard to wrap your arms around that. Absolutely. Because as you know, not only in our country, but in other countries too, there's a great deal of stigma. In our country, with the Alzheimer's associations nationally, that stigma continues.
Mm-hmm.
And many times it is a lack of information and education.
Mm-hmm.
That somehow they feel that this person may be acting like this on purpose. I mean, I've heard that too.
Mm-hmm.
Just as somebody would have a heart disease, this is a brain disease. And that stigma needs to be addressed. I mean, one of the reasons why I started, in 2017, Alzheimer's Care Armenia, in Armenia, is to address that stigma and to create those sustainable programs for people, because Alzheimer's disease and other dementias is on the rise internationally.
2 friends that were diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's when they were 69. And so I hear about this, there's a rise in it. It's not just because we have more testing. So why is it? Why it's scary to think that it's on the rise?
Well, I am not at all an expert, but I'm going to offer just a 1-sentence theory and then turn it over to Jane, who is an expert. I think that a fair amount of it has to do with lifestyle, with the stress in our lives. Done.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. In our foreword by Dr. William Schenkel, of the Schenkel Clinic, it's his work, takes into effect, it's multifaceted, right? So it's also about nutrition. It's also about managing stress.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the whole person. And I think, we're still learning about why is this occurring in younger people? Why is it occurring in more women than men at an earlier age, in their 40s, even 50s, I'm seeing that in my practice. So it is, I think lifestyle. I think it's also the amount of stress that we're under, the lack of exercise, and nutrition drives that too. So it's really a whole person. You have to look at that whole person. And also too is, let's not forget, people years ago were not living very long, right? I mean, our longevity now, we're young at 90, right? We're old when we're 90. Midlife is what now? 65, 70 is midlife. So people are living longer than any other time before in society. And we're seeing this now, which affects, and I think on bottom line, I think a lot of it is stress.
Mm-hmm. And with this pandemic, sorry, Allison, why don't you go ahead?
I was just going to say, if you think about why people who have the means go to spas, it's to wind down. You get away from your devices. You have delicious food prepared for you. You are physically active. You meet new people. All of those things that we associate with this great indulgence. In fact, you can bring those things into your normal life. You don't have to go to a spa or fantasize about a spa. And I think that increasingly research is looking at those things and saying, you need to wind down, dial it back, let your brain rest. And I think that's also why there's an increase in all kinds of well-being things. But you have to, it's not as easy as a pill. It's a lifestyle choice. And I think that many people have a hard time with that idea of, I'm responsible. I can make these changes and maybe those will help me in a big way.
I heard that there's an app for your phone where it can alert you if you're on the phone too much, right? If you're on your device too much, so that, because sometimes we just get attached or addicted to it.
I remember in 1995 being on a plane for the first time with somebody with a laptop. I didn't even have a computer yet. We were both on our way back from a conference, and she was like processing all of her receipts on her laptop. And I was just completely incredulous because I always thought of flying as the ultimate downtime. You have a book, they bring you a beverage, you just hang out. And then the next thing I knew, there were people who could talk on their phones and all kinds of stuff in the air. And somebody that year told me about the term data smog. The idea that there's too much data out there, that our brains can't keep up with the new volume and speed of computing power. And so we feel like we have to try. And that cannot be good for us.
True. So Dr. Jane, this is the pandemic time and people are going through some depression. And how does depression and dementia, it must just complicate the whole issue. And, people don't dare to move their family member to a facility. And so they're at home. And what advice would you give them?
Absolutely. Many times it's very important for the neurologist to tease out how much of this is the cognitive impairment is due to a depression. And when that depression lifts, we may see, and we do see sometimes that person improves in their cognitive functioning. So the person that's at home in bed, refuses to get out of bed, is doing very little during the day, is obviously ultimately going to become depressed. And so that depression increases that progression of that brain disease. So you have to figure out ways to get that person engaged and busy and on a schedule. It's very important to seek the expertise of a neurologist, as well as many times I provide a lot of counseling support, not just for the family, but also for that person. That transitional counseling or the supportive counseling or cognitive behavioral counseling to help that person with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease or other dementias, really get them out of that depression, because the depression has to be treated. It's not something that we can ignore, and it will snowball, it will increase, and the person then will begin to shut down. And when that person begins to shut down, it's very hard to bring that person back. It's possible, and I have seen that in my work, to bring the person back, but it takes expertise to do that. But it is possible. But you want to avoid going down that road, right? You want to be able to nip it when you start observing that your loved one is showing these signs of depression. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to get out of bed, or they don't want to shower, right? They think they already have, or they don't feel like getting up, and doing that, or taking a shower, cleaning up. They don't feel like doing a puzzle. They don't want to go for a walk. So you have to figure out ways to get them to do that.
That actually is our very first chapter. The title, which I think might be my favorite chapter title, is Clarifying 3 of the 4 D words: dementia, depression, and diagnosis. The 4th D word, in case you're curious, is denial. And we talk about that in a later chapter. But the overlap, if you will, between dementia and depression, that one can mimic the other, that's one of the many benefits of actually having a neurologist examine someone who's having memory challenges, just to figure out what is going on. Because the sooner you know, the better off you are, and the better off that person will be.
Yeah, and the family members, I think sometimes they get trapped and think they have to figure it out, but they they're not capable of figuring out what is needed to be done. So we have to wrap up our talk today, and maybe your final thoughts of, what is your message that you would like to give people from this book?
I'll go first. If I had just one, it would be to realize that you cannot do this by yourself, that you shouldn't be embarrassed, that you should not feel guilty, that you should not be in denial, that you should reach out not only to people who are involved in this kind of care as part of their jobs, as part of their expertise, but also to other people, so that you don't shrink the world of the person you're trying to take care of. And if you don't have primary responsibility for somebody, but you have casual friends or colleagues who are experiencing memory loss, don't abandon them because you're afraid of what to say.
I mean, well stated. It's really all about, not giving up hope, and that you can't do it alone, as Allison was saying. This is something that you cannot do by yourself. I cannot emphasize that more. It's something that you have to ask for help, and you start with a neurologist. You begin with your primary care doctor and a neurologist. And, you have to do your research and have that support, such as support groups or support forums and education and classes. So reach out, and, many people are affected throughout our country. And so you're not alone.
So many. Well, if our viewers would like to connect with you, what's the best way to connect with you, Allison?
For me, it is via email, and that is Allison, ALYSON, at Concierge, so like a concierge, but with my last name, KUHNCIERGE.com.
Perfect. And Dr. Jane?
The best way is just to go to the website. Okay. And the website is agingmattersinc.com. So agingmattersinc.com.
Thank you. So our thanks to Dr. Jane Mahakian and Allison Kuhn, and especially for your book, I Hear You. And thank you all of you who tuned in today. And that concludes our program at the Commonwealth Club of California. Thank you, everyone.